So here we are again. The EV Summit comes around, and I make no secret of how important I think this event is. It was 2019 that I was here, and it was my first one. I sat in a Neo outside, which was a prototype that had been here. Today, there's vehicles out there which are new. You're presenting ideas that are new. What I want us to do on this panel is to reveal some things that you may not know, number one, but also, hopefully, provoke some thoughts that you may not have had and ask us those questions. So why I think this event is so good is because we get to see an opportunity to showcase new concepts, new ideas, and therefore new plans to improve the things that we see today. So this is my 20th year in sustainable transport infrastructure, which is ironic considering I happened to be on Friday night riding my bike, but we go on. I've enjoyed working with buses, cycling, walking. The whole transport infrastructure hierarchy has brought me to this point today. I moved over to PAYTHRU. I'm their Chief Strategy Officer. We started together 3 years ago. Just going to try and press this. Ready? Oh, that's the wrong one. It's supposed to be this one. Thank you. So I joined PAYTHRU in, well, 2.5 years ago now. And I did so because I saw an opportunity to improve the infrastructure that we have for EV charging by putting the consumer first. I became so tired of using chargers where multiple apps wouldn't download properly or my card wouldn't be accepted properly. And I could see from my technical ability there's nothing wrong with the charger. It's probably the payment terminal that has gone down. So for me, I felt there was a huge gap that needed to be filled. And having spent what was then 17 years, I decided that I had a great opportunity to join a company like PAYTHRU. PAYTHRU are pioneering, we're disruptive, we're unapologetic, we are focused, and we're moving through the global market in the next couple of years. So what we've done is we've produced a white paper. Let's just see if this works. Which we've titled Putting User Experience First, because we believe there's something called payment anxiety. We started out with range anxiety, vehicles, including my own, that could only do 80 or 90 miles. Then we had charger anxiety. Will the charger work when we get there? And now I believe we have something called payment anxiety, which means that when you get to that charger, will it take the payment I want? Do I have to download a load of apps? Will I have enough connectivity to make the app work? We didn't do this on our own. We're very grateful to a few of you in the audience, I see your faces, who did answer the call for the survey. We made sure we spoke to private drivers as well as fleet drivers. We made sure that we spoke to industry professionals as well as just us in-house and our partners and our collaborative atmosphere. We've identified in this paper a few key parts that you need to be aware of if you're planning charging infrastructure moving forwards. Payments is a really underrated and ironically undervalued part of our industry. If you think about how much wet fuel gets processed each week, it's approximately £77 million a week. Now, through some friends, we were able to work out what the equivalent is today for kilowatt hours processed. It's about 10,000. So we've got a very long way and a very profitable market to go at if we get this right. It never ceases to amaze me that people don't think payments are important in this ecosystem, in this infrastructure. You just have to start asking the question, how many times have you had a charger fail? How many times have you had a pre-authorization that didn't get refunded? How many times have you been pre-authed 45 quid when all you wanted was £10? Or conversely, how many times have you screamed at the charger, just take my money, all I need is the energy in my car to get home? Payment failed. So you try another card, and then you're just so frustrated that you're never going to use that charge point operator again. That's certainly my experience, and I drive 25,000 miles a year, and I don't have a home charger. So if there's any way of making it fail, I've probably tried it. Dear friend Paul Kirby there from the EV Cafe talking about the importance of downtime. We know that fleets in our industry have different priorities, let's say, to a private car driver. They're not being listened to loudly enough. They're representing the largest part of our market now. So it has to stop. And I really hope that this year, 5 years on from the first time I attended this, and we saw the wonderful EDF video with Robert Miles' children played on this big screen, and we realized that today could be the start of something, but it needs to be a partnership, it needs to be collaborative, and I'm delighted that the people who will be joining on my stage are exactly that. We are missing one. We're missing James Lee from INFINIUM Logistics. They've been building some impressive fleet hubs with very impressive private funding. But we do have Visa, Connected KERB, and of course, my MD founder, Keith Brown from PAYTHRU. So I would really urge you to download this paper. The last one was used in lots of broadsheet press, but also policy-making decisions. I'm just going to display a QR code. Please do download it. That will be available on LinkedIn and hopefully at the end of our presentation as well. So I'm within time with 4 seconds to go. My teacher's pet, excellent. If we could move on to the warm welcome to people onto the panel. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. So you might recognize some of us, and you also might not. Now, I think what's important is to allow everyone to introduce themselves, but from left to right, we have myself, Sara Sloman, Chief Strategy Officer at PAYTHRU, Keith Brown, MD Founder at PAYTHRU, Anna Grau from Visa, and on the end, familiar face there, Paul Ayres from Connected KERB. Now, one by one, if you could tell us a bit about what you do for your role, but also the industry, starting with you, Keith.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Graveyard slot, so hopefully we'll keep you awake talking about stuff as fascinating as payments, which has been my challenge, to be interesting about payments for about 15 years now. PAYTHRU sort of migrated into the EV industry after spending about 8 years building parking solutions with some of the world's biggest parking companies. It taught us a lot about behavior, drivers' behavior. It taught us a lot about traffic problems. And it also told us a lot about adoption, because in that period, the industry moved almost completely from a hardware-based solutions to software. All the apps you currently use, although actually now, with the national parking platform, we almost have roaming for parking, because you can use Ringo. I think Oxford is actually one of the first to adopt the national parking platform, which means you can use the app anywhere across the UK. So it was seeing that migration in that industry that led us to wonder if we could apply some of those learnings, and also learnings from the wider payments industry, into EV.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, I'm certainly very pleased to be with you on this journey. Anna.
Brilliant. So I'm Anna Grau. It's great to be here. So hi, everyone. I'm director at Visa, and I look after fleet and B2B mobility solutions. And mainly what we see, and I think it's some of the aspects that you have already articulated, but we see that the EV payment experience is very fragmented from a consumer point of view, from a fleet point of view. So there's a lot of opportunity, let's put it in a way, to innovate and bring closer payment solutions, innovation, and enhance data. And that's something that we are taking a look. So how we can create an interoperable experience, and also how we can provide the desired experience at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I don't mind admitting, poor Anna has had to explain it to me a few times, but today we're going to take away all the myths and demystify everything and show how something like Visa Fleet can help. And Paul, welcome.
But I think she needs another round of applause, actually. It's an unbelievable performance. Well done. Hello, many of you have had the chance to meet over the last 6 or 7 years. Paul Ayres, one of the founders of Connected KERB. Still look after bits and pieces of the UK business, but 2 years ago, we decided to take the model that we developed relatively successfully here in the UK and export that internationally. So we've now got operations in Australia, in North America, where we just won a significant contract and have just been accepted onto the NASPO framework, which is the legitimization of our business over in North America. And we've got operations now in Central Europe and so on. So we're an unashamedly proud technology company. To give you some idea of my background, though, I come from a software world, so this is all new to me. I'm effectively dealing with what I promised I wouldn't, which is hardware. My view of our industry is that it's a hardware-driven industry that needs to pivot to a digital industry, to a virtual industry, to glue all of those assets together, and I'm intrigued about where this conversation will go. Also, to Sarah's point, I'm intrigued about how we remove the consumer inertia that exists in our industry so that we can change the way in which EV adoption moves forward. And so I'm sure we'll have some questions that will relate to that. But thanks, Sarah, for inviting me.
Yeah, I think the consumer, it's just nuts that we don't pay enough attention to how they want to pay. We've just come off the EV rally. That was pretty epic, and I learned that a lot of transactions are done either by a roaming card or just via a contactless credit card. Some CPOs are reporting over 80% of those transactions going through as a debit card, credit card payment. But that's because they don't need a receipt. They don't need to validate. Obviously, you can automate that, but it's a bit of a pain. It's a pain for me. It must be a pain for them. Now, Keith, I know we have many a chat about the importance of consumer behaviour, and you've recently spotted some new stats, I think.
It's actually old stats, but based on some new stats from Mark, which in the keynote this morning, which is fascinating, really, because it's a very old model. So it's a thing called the innovation technology curve, which a lot of you may be familiar with. It's been around since the 50s. Over 6,000 companies across a range of industries testified to this model and its veracity. What it suggests is that and we saw the words tipping point. Why are we at the tipping point? Well, interesting, what the model shows is that the innovators and early adopters, which is many of us in this room, usually constitute about 16% of the market. That happens to be pretty much what the penetration of EVs are that Mark shared with us this morning from Auto Trader. The early majority, that's the chasm we have to get these people engaged, is 34% of a market. That's exactly the number that Mark quoted, with no connivance, I promise you, this morning, because I had no idea what Mark was going to say until I arrived today. But that's the exact number Mark quoted as somebody that are interested. So the question becomes, how do we move the argument forward? I think the question this morning was, what are the challenges? What do we need to do to get them there? And I'm going to quote, Sara said I'm not allowed to do this, but at my age, I haven't got the memory I used to have. So I just wanted to quote one or two things about what the early majority seek. And what it says is the mainstream early majority typically values innovation that solves a specific problem. And I'm going to paraphrase some of the things, but they want fully tested solutions that adhere to industry standards. They're looking for incremental, proven ways of doing what they already do. To the other point that was made this morning about pricing, they require guaranteed off-the-shelf performance, but rapid payback and or cost neutrality. So we're recognizing that point. But here's the thing that affects us here in the software industry, okay? They hate complexity. And I believe, as you will see when you read the report that we commissioned, complexity exists in manifold ways. And all of the people that we surveyed were EV drivers. We weren't even asking the early majority. We're asking the existing market what they feel about the experience. And believe you me, payments is a key part of it. But do you know what? There's one thing we've learned is most of the solutions already exist. Right? So if we're looking at how payments overcame, I mean, Sara, you were part of it, I know, but mass transit. Pre-auth doesn't exist in mass transit, does it? You don't have a pre-auth on your card when you go through Transport for London. We had ways of enabling people to pay easily with an Oyster card. That's a wallet, which you could store on your phone, because we've now morphed to that world. And my final point on this is, I think the best example of a company that has translated hardware to software is Uber. Because they took hardware and they took waving in the street and not knowing where I'm going and how much it's going to cost. And they did it with one thing. They just put the user in the middle, in the cloud, and said that hardware serves the user. And they made the experience brilliant. You could have a number of cards. You could get a receipt. You knew when you were going to turn up. You knew where the options were. And you could have any payment experience you chose. Choice, I think, was what Pinar said earlier.
There's two observations, I think. One being, EY, thank you for putting that slide up earlier that showed payments and roaming as being the number one of 5 priorities. Thank you. And even in the break, somebody said to me, "God, yeah, we made it onto the screen," because people don't talk about payments even nearly enough. And Anna, can I pick your brain now? Please describe to us, what is Visa 2.0?
Sure. So firstly, life is, let's say, complicated for drivers and fleets because they are managing and maintaining different and multiple payment cards and management tools, right? So, and at the same time, to your point, we are seeing that payment preference, they are going towards convenience and simplicity, so that what it's sure out there is that the solutions need to keep up with these demands, right? And we are seeing that today, on average, fleet drivers, they hold 2.3 cards to manage their mobility, in some cases even 5 different cards. And we have mentioned it in the previous sessions as well. As different EV players out there with different payment solutions, this creates a lot of confusion for the drivers, but as well time inefficiencies for businesses trying to keep all the tracking expense. And with that, we were wondering, what is how the existing solutions are working, right? And some of the things that they told us, the fleet drivers, were that there's inflexibility in spend with the current payment solutions out there. There's lack of digital experience, and also there's a lack of consolidated reporting. And that's mainly what we are trying to do with the Visa Fleet 2.0, right? To support all these needs. So mainly you would have a Fleet 2.0, which is an advanced mobility card solution through our partners for fleets, in order to be able to spend for any business expenses, not only on EV fuel, parking, and tolls, and let's put the obvious ones, but that they can spend it everywhere, right? And also, more importantly, we have touched about the importance of accessibility to data. So Fleet 2.0 aims as well to enhance additional information and new insights directly to businesses so that they can have that in a consolidated way and hence have a better understanding of the total cost of ownership with expenses.
Yeah, it's a big team that the Visa have got, and I was really heartened to hear about it because, of course, Visa being such a respected and recognised brand, turning their attention to fleet and helping us transition, I think is excellent. That's I'm so grateful you came. Thank you for being here. Data is one of Paul's favourite subjects, so we'll come to you next. But before I do, the second observation that I didn't share with you was a special thanks to Alec Peachy for highlighting some of the elements from the white paper that show 80+% of people just can't be bothered to download an app. Really can't be bothered. And something that I learned about was how this sort of behind the scenes, I'm not from payments, you can tell I'm from infrastructure. So now learning about the financial infrastructure has been fascinating to me. And it's about how everything you buy is kind of coded, right? So that's why your sort of fleet card traditionally wouldn't allow you to buy your sandwiches unless you had a special one. These cards are different. They understand what you're trying to buy and enable that driver to do that and be gone faster. So whilst hardware is improving, we're seeing sort of software, data, and payments improving too. Now, Paul, you work quite internationally, which is very fancy. And actually, apologies to our other guest who has had to go to meet a Saudi Arabia colleague, so we did let him go. That's absolutely fine. I don't mind at all. Now, what trends can you see on the sort of evolution, moving away from hardware and making it more of a software data play? What examples can you bring to us of where that value of the data has been seen? I know you work in America. You've seen a lot of differences there. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think first things first, I mean, to many of you who are involved in our industry over here, you've done an extraordinary job. You've taken the UK to a position where we're challenging the rest of Northern Europe. We've got an increasing number of adoptive consumers, and we've done a great job so far, but the work's only just beginning. To Keith's point, how we move, in my opinion, those people across the chasm, how we get the innovators across to an early adopter community, is to make things more compelling from a consumer perspective. And that compelling part of the consumer experience is all about how do I make it hassle-free, easy to adopt, reliable, available, all of the stuff that, by the way, we all do every day on different apps that we use on our smartphones. We all do the same thing on smart televisions, on the devices around our homes, and indeed where we work. So the concept of saying no, software won't be an enabler, in my opinion, is utterly wrong, and there are a couple of reasons for it. Right now, we're still operating in walled garden scenarios. What I mean by that is, I was lucky enough to be around at a company called Netscape, which was the big innovator of the internet way back when. And that was a similar level of change in the computing industry then, where we moved from these proprietary systems, everybody tried to do everything inside the walled garden, and guess what? They were overtaken and then basically overwhelmed, these legacy vendors, by new vendors who said, actually, let's be interoperable. Let's integrate with Visa. Let's not copy what they do. Let's integrate with experts in certain domains like PAYTHRU. Let's integrate with hardware infrastructure as we know it. Let's build software technologies that take users on a better journey. And if I had to critique ourselves at Connected KERB, and we're striving as hard as we can, we're trying to build open platforms for hardware and software. We're trying to build much more engaging technologies for the consumer. Because at the end of the day, we need consumers to adopt this technology, not because we're running businesses, but because the reason we're doing this in the first place is we're trying to remove some of the damaging effect of traditional transport on the environment. And I think people fail to forget that. Guess what? Every consumer out there probably is worried. Certainly, if you're a parent, you're definitely worried. My kids drive me nuts about this because they're old enough now to understand the impact of what we're doing. So I think it's all about how do I tune consumer behavior. The one comment I would say is that the US, where I've spent a lot of time over the last year or two, is way behind where we are in terms of evolution. But in terms of customer experience, user experience, the journey that a user goes through, they're way ahead. And they're getting better and better and better at it. Now, there's a part of that that says the US community is better at adopting technology. I'm not sure I completely buy into that. There's also a part of it that says people are looking at how you build a confluence of options that enable a consumer to choose. At the moment, we're not really a choice-driven sector, and we need to change that. And I think tuning things like payment, which is a fundamentally important part of the user experience, has to get better. Similarly, any UX, interoperability, integration of multimodal transport, those types of things where everybody goes, oh, no, that's too difficult. Guess what? It isn't too difficult. We're seeing now Philadelphia and Chicago, people building applications that enable users to go from A to B using multiple different forms of transport, single payment mechanism, seamless user experience. And I think that's really what we're going to see as time moves on in the sector.
Well, I certainly hope so. It certainly feels like we've sort of got a lot of opportunity here. And Keith, I know you're a visionary. It really is quite mind-blowing what you come up with and how your brain works. I want to know what you think is going to be the future of payment, and maybe in the next 3 to 5 years.
Invisibility.
Invisibility. Mm.
Yeah, because the best payment systems are invisible. And I think why this audience and this event is so important is if you look at the best innovations of payments, if you go to any group of people and say, what's the best payment experience you've had? They won't say Barclaycard, or they won't even say Visa, actually. They will say Amazon or Apple. Interesting, that, isn't it? Because Amazon isn't a payments company, it's a merchant. Just like a lot of people in this room, you're here to sell your products. But they just made it easier, one click. I remember when that came in, it was a revolution. It's just tokenizing a card that's been around for quite a while. Apple, they were a walled garden. We were talking about this earlier. They started as a walled garden. You had to go through Apple Store. And then they realized, actually, why don't we just open the ecosystem out to everyone and make money from payments? Which was quite interesting, really. And look where they are now. And Apple Google Pay, I can tell you, because we support both of them, has a tremendous effect on consumer response, whether you're collecting a debt right through to whether you're offering an online payment experience. And remember as well, if you're the merchant, back to Anna's point, you get rich data back. If you actually set yourself up as an Apple, you've got customer registrations. So somebody said earlier, all this registration, Apple Pay gives you that back if you set it up correctly. You've already got registration within the payment because you're the deliverer of that merchant, you're the merchant. So my view is the solutions are out there, and it's the merchants that are in the best place to adopt it. And Apple's a hardware company. It isn't actually. It's a lifetime experience company if you listen to their marketing. But that's exactly, they crossed the chasm. They jumped. Steve Jobs saw the vision, saw the future. So just like their systems, it's almost invisible. What do you do with Apple to pay? Yeah. It's look at it, go.
Yeah, it's definitely my favourite. In
click,
fact,
click, go.
I completely abandoned entire baskets of stuff I thought I wanted if it wasn't Apple.
So
Gosh,
let's
it's just too
take
easy.
one step further. Amazon Marketplace. What is that? Amazon Marketplace is vehicle to grid. They decided, well, why can't we actually have a payment system that embraces somebody else's ecosystem? And they've done it. And the technology is here, isn't it? It's been deployed elsewhere. And I do think we've got to not reinvent the wheel here. You know, a lot of problems like booking, you know, a lot of people I talk to say, oh, it'll be great when we have booking. Anybody from the, I know there's a chap from the parking industry, I met him earlier. we were doing booking years ago. It's a traffic problem, is booking. It's not an EV problem. And so we just need to cast around and look at these other industries, because actually the consumer looks at those other industries for his experiences. In the old days, and I'm old enough to remember the old days, people would say, I compare my experience in a bank to other banks. I compare my experience in a restaurant to other restaurants. Not in the digital world. We compare it to other digital experiences. So we've got to embrace what's out there and move quicker.
I agree. We're coming into question times from the audience now. I think there is going to be a microphone moving around. But just staying with that, the vision I had for the future, I didn't say it, it was said to me, which was, I want to take the payment away from my drivers. I don't want them to have this stress anymore. You know, roll on automatic billing. And then that's our problem now on the payments industry side, to work out how that's going to work. How are you going to have different cost centers for different drivers when they share a vehicle? It sounds so simple, and it is once you look to other industries, as Keith was saying, and find the answer. And the answers do all exist, and that's why I'm so heartened by this. And it's kind of our collective pledge, I think, on this stage. You represent hardware and software and data and cards and manufacturing. We've got the answers collectively here, and just collaborating with others, we'll find a faster way for the UK to stand out. Questions, please? I'd like that. We've got one in the middle here and one over there second. Hi, Scott, thank you. Here she comes. You're a wonderfully quiet audience.
Good afternoon. I work for a DC fast charger manufacturer called Energetica out of Poland. The biggest complaint we get from our customers is payment terminals. They create a lousy customer experience. It is dreadful. And quite how the payments industry is so bad at doing it on EV chargers just befuddles me. I'll give you an experience on my Tesla. I have a Tesla because I could afford it because second-hand markets, by the by. I plug and charge in, I go, and I've walked down the side of the vehicle and the car is charging. That's 5 seconds. So what we're forced to buy as Energetica, customers of the payment system, is an inferior product. So who's in the industry is actually going to give us something that's going to deliver our customers, the CPOs, an excellent customer experience?
Well, let's take the second question as well, because I've only got a couple of minutes, so let's see if they're the same or different. Thank you for that, that's great. Scott, pass it on.
Tactics, quite closely related, really. You mentioned Amazon, Google, we've seen that in gas. Amazon have got involved in the automotive, digitizing the vehicle, making it the wallet. Where do you see that in that connectivity piece? We've arguably sold the reconciliation bit, that's quite clear, and I get behind the comments that you've all made. But what is that next step, the tipping point in that aspect? Nice,
thank you both. Yeah, Keith, it sounds like you and potentially...
I think the terminal point is a great one. The problem is the terminals that the industry is using were not built for this industry. That's one. Okay? If you, personally, I'm not at the moment, but for one very good reason, right? Which is they're not very good, and we're doing something about that. But the problem is the payments industry is vast, right? And this industry is small. Sara quoted the numbers. So this isn't so much not a dot on the radar. It's not even on the radar, right? So people aren't investing in it. We are, for that reason. So even if you look at a lot of the terminals that are being sold to you, they weren't even invented. You look at the size of them, right? And you look at what they're designed for. They weren't designed for the EV industry. We are passionate about changing that. A lot of the user experience wasn't designed for this industry, and we're changing that. And that's a software thing. But we've also got to work with these guys, the acquirers, a huge infrastructure to change it. And that's not an excuse, but it's coming. It's changing. And I absolutely get your point about the current models and currently what you're being forced to consume in the market is inadequate. Totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Who would like to take the second one?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to cover both at the same time, if that's okay. So in terms of what you were saying, I think it was a point made by you. Like it's very important when it comes to payments to give choice, right? So one of the things obviously is on the acceptance side of the infrastructure, as Keith was articulating, but at the same time, offer other solutions. So you touch on the plug and charge. And this is something that we as an industry will need to put all our efforts to make that widespread industry on payments. There's a new task force built and led by the ENVICO. So ENVICO, for those that you don't know, so they are a technical body that creates all the standards within the payment industry. So that, to ensure that everything is accepted. So there's a new task force to examine how EMV payments will be allocated to that. And the other question?
That was about digital wallet.
Yeah, so very shortly on that, but part of the Visa Fleet 2.0 is also to ensure that tokenization services are in place. So we see most of the current payment systems, they don't count on tokenization, and this is such an important service that we need to have in mind. So tokenization for digital wallets would be one from my perspective.
Yeah, wonderful. And we've got the flashy, flashy, flashy light. But my point is, you could talk about this forever. So I'm really pleased that you listened. Thank you ever so much. Please give my panel a round of applause.